Welcome to this week's Message Connect. We're finishing our study on Real Mature. So for the last few weeks, we've been looking at the importance of growing spiritually, going deeper, but also getting connected in the local church. Now, the purpose of the Message Connect is to help you take last weekend's message, which you can find on our website or on our church app, and dig into this a little deeper to apply this personally to our lives. So I hope that this study has been helpful. I hope it's been encouraging and challenging for you as we've walked through what is your next step to take in your walk with the Lord and your walk with the church family. So today, the big idea behind this study today is to help us to go and be the disciples that God wants us to be. Now, what we've seen through this entire series is as we take these steps of faith, that growing people change. That's what God expects of us as we become more like Jesus and less of ourselves. In Exodus chapter 3, God is asking Moses to do something that Moses really feels that he is not qualified to do. So God was asking him to step out and to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, out of bondage, out of slavery, and take them towards the promised land. Now, Moses' hesitation is rooted in the fact that he had a picture in his mind of what he thought a leader was, or a leader was supposed to be. And his picture was not there. Now, God's definition and God's description of a leader is far easier than our thought process or our description. God's definition of a leader is simply this: a leader is anyone who makes themselves available for God to use, anyone who steps up to make a difference. So what God does is he comes to Moses and he says, Moses, I want you to be my leader. I want to use you as a leader. And Moses is really hesitant. He doesn't feel qualified. I mean, he's downright reluctant. I don't want to do this. Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through 9. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. Now, up to this point, it sounds like God's got it covered. It sounds like God's going to do this, like God's going to take care of this. And Moses is like, yes, God's the one who's stepping up. God's the one who's stepping out. God's going to lead the children of Israel out of slavery. Yes, God, you go. Verses 8 and 9. God goes on to say, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. The land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. Now, I'm sure at this point in time, Moses is like, wait a minute. I thought you just said you were going to lead them out of Egypt. Why are you bringing me into this? Why are you pulling me into this thing you want to do and bringing the children of Israel out of bondage? So one of the amazing qualities of God is that God always involves imperfect people like me, like you, in doing his work, the work of God around the world. God is the farthest thing away from being a control freak that you can get. God has every right. He could be the ultimate control freak. But, God could say to us, get out of the way. Just move. Don't make a mess of this. You've already messed it up enough. Just sit over in the corner, stay out of the way. Don't try to complicate this. I'll do this. But God doesn't do that. God invites us into what he is doing and what he wants to do in us and what he wants to do through us. Instead, God takes the opposite posture and he says, I want to involve you in what I am doing in the world and around the world. Even though we are guilty of messing all this up in the first place. And many times God says, I will equip you. I want to equip you. I want to empower you. I want to do something in you and through you that will affect the lives of other people. I want to ask you to do something that you don't feel qualified to do. Now, that's what God's response to us is. But Moses' response And maybe we're more like Moses sometimes than we are the faithful disciples that God has called us to be. And I know this has been my response at times. I'm sure this has been yours. This is what Moses does. Exodus chapter 3, verse 11. But Moses protested to God, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt?" You see, Moses argued with God. And by the way, you never win when you do this. Moses' objection was an inward focus. So basically what he's saying is I don't have the skill set. I don't have the qualifications. I don't have a degree. I'm not prepared for this. I don't have the experience that you need for what you're asking me to go and do. So God responds to Moses when he answered him, and he said, "I will be with you." So God is saying, what makes you think that this has anything to do with you? It's about what I'm about to do in you and through you. How did Moses feel about the challenge God was giving him? Have you ever been faced with something you felt totally unqualified to do? Maybe a new job, a new responsibility. How did you face it? How did God reveal himself to you through that experience? God says, this isn't about what you can do. This is about what I can do through you. This isn't about what we bring to the table. This is about what I'm going to do in your life and through your life. If you and I could do this on our own, it wouldn't be near as spectacular as when the power of God shows up and he works through an ordinary, everyday person like me and you and does an spectacular, extraordinary work. Because if it was just us doing it, it'd be another ordinary day. God specializes in doing extraordinary things through ordinary people. God says, "Moses, I just want you to be available. Just be available to me." But Moses he's a lot like all of us. He just doesn't see it yet. He protests again. His first objection was an inward focus. His next objection was basically an outward focus. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 13, but Moses protested again. "If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what should I tell them?" You see, what Moses was dealing with here is the fear of man, the fear of criticism. Now, in Exodus chapter 4, verses 2 through 9, if you go back and read that passage of scripture, Moses is asked by God, "What is that in your hand?" It was a staff. He had a shepherd's staff. He says, "Take that staff and throw it on the ground." And Moses does. And it turns into a snake. And then God says to Moses, "Reach down and pick up the snake." Now, I would have been done right then, right there. I'm not picking up a snake. But Moses, to his credit, he's obedient. He reaches down, he grabs a hold of the snake, and it turns back into a staff. Then he says, "Let me see your hand." Moses shows him his hand. He says, "Look, that's a perfectly healthy hand. Stick it in your cloak. Stick it in the pocket." And he sticks it into his pocket and he says, "Pull it out." God says, "Pull it out, Moses." And when he does, he had leprosy. And it was, leprosy's nasty. It's awful. And leprosy, the skin's falling off. There's sores. There's oozing. I mean, it's horrible. And God says, "Now stick it back in." Well, yes, gladly, I will. He sticks it back into his pocket. He pulls it back out and it's perfectly healthy again. The reason God does this is he says, these are the kind of signs that I will use. When people ask, "Who is sending you?" You just do this. Throw down your staff. You show them your hand. "I will do a work in you and through you, Moses, and they will know that the Lord your God is with you." You see, what Moses is doing is he's protesting. And he's saying, "God, I just personally, I can't do this. God, these other people, they're gonna ask me all these different questions and I'm not gonna be prepared. I'm not good at this." And Moses goes from protesting to pleading. And we see this in verse 10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I've never been. I'm not now. And even though you've spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." In other words, what Moses is doing is he's assuming that a leader has to have eloquent speech. In chapter 4, verses 11 through 12, then the Lord asked Moses, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you and as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say." Then Moses, he wasn't done. He pleads again. And basically what he's saying is this in chapter 4, verse 13. But Moses again pleaded, "Lord, please send anyone else." So what he's doing now is he's basically throwing his arms up in the air going, "I don't want to do it. I've tried all these other excuses. I protested, I pleaded. I just don't want to go back to Egypt. I don't want to do this." In verse 14, then the Lord became angry with Moses. "All right," he said, "what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks well, and look, he is on his way to meet you now. He will be delighted to see you. Talk to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people. He will be your mouthpiece, and you will stand in the place of God for him, telling him what to say. And take your shepherd's staff with you and use it to perform the miraculous signs I have shown you." To Moses' credit, he obeys God, and he walks up to Pharaoh and he says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." The rest of the story is God used Moses in incredible ways. It wasn't an easy path. It wasn't an easy road. But God takes Moses' abilities and he takes his ordinary everyday life and does something extraordinary in him and through him because Moses was willing to be available for God. So God was not asking, Moses to do this in his power and strength. God was asking Moses to be a leader, and Moses didn't see it. I think one of the greatest qualifications of leadership is the fact that Moses didn't see that he was a leader. Now here's how God sees leaders. A leader is anyone who steps up to make a difference. A leader is anyone who just says, "God, here am I. God, use me. God, send me, please. Take my ordinary, everyday, coming and going life, and Lord, use it in any way that you want." And God says, "Perfect. That's all I need." And God takes our ordinary and he says, "Watch what I will do with the ordinary. I will do extraordinary things with the ordinary things that you have given to me, that you've made available to me." A leader is anyone who steps up to make a difference, not dependent on a title or a position or natural abilities. What places in your life has God called you to be a leader? Have you answered him in obedience, or are you resisting the call of God in any way? Do you feel qualified, or are you depending on God to lead you through? When I first went into ministry, I had all this optimism and excitement of what ministry would truly be like. I heard a pastor say at Kentucky Christian College when I was a freshman, he said, "If you're going to be a pastor," and we were in a pastoral 101 class, and he said, you're going to need to develop the courage of a lion." I thought, why? And his whole process was to say, you're going to have to make difficult decisions at times, and you're not going to have all the information. You're going to have the courage and the boldness to do what God has called you to do, what he lays on your heart, God's vision. And then he said, you're also going to have the skin of a rhino. You need to develop the skin of a rhino. Well, I thought, well, why? And then he said, because people are going to shoot at you. Well, I didn't fully understand that at that point, but it makes a whole lot more sense to me now. And then he goes on to say, you're going to have to develop the heart of a teddy bear. Basically, there's a saying that I've heard for many years that goes like this. You're going to have thick skin and a tender heart at the same time when you're in ministry. So what God says, I need you to be courageous. I need you to be bold. I need you to have thick skin. because there are going to be times there are going to be lots and lots of arrows, and they're going to come from different directions. Moses needed courage and boldness. He needed thick skin, and he did. But don't let the wounds that are inflicted as you kind of get hit from time to time cause you to grow bitter and cynical towards others. And I know it is not easy. That is a tough path to walk down. But we must maintain a soft heart. You see, God is not interested in your ability. He's interested in your availability. Jesus said, "For even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." In other words, what Jesus was saying, you are never more like me, like Jesus, than when you are serving others like Jesus. You see, when we serve, we show others the goodness of God. How has someone displayed the goodness of God to you by the way they have served you? What step do you need to take this week to serve others more and to show them God's goodness? Moses was successful because he was willing to be obedient. He was willing to be available. And God took that. He took that faithfulness, this ordinary, everyday man, and used him in extraordinary ways. What God calls you to, he qualifies you to it. We just have to step out in faith. You don't get qualified first. You step out by faith, you're obedient, you make yourself available, and watch what God can do in your life. This Message Connect is all about helping you to take the next steps. So a discussion guide has been provided for you, and you can use that to dig deeper into this study, the Word of God, together. We want to challenge you. We want to encourage you to take these next steps. At Ringgold, we believe that growing people change. Now, as we grow, as we work through this together, one of the things that we have to do together, we learn in rows. That's what worship's all about. But we grow in circles. And so when we get together and we circle up and we begin to talk, we need to start talking. And we need to start thinking through this. We need to start sharing our lives, sharing our burdens with one another. We need to start praying. There's nothing like the power of prayer. But most of all, we need to be doers of the word. We need to start doing. We need to follow Jesus faithfully, be found as his disciples, servants of the Most High. God bless you.